everybody. My name is Greg Knox, and this is the Lament Configuration Podcast. I'm here with my regular co-host, Ria Fend.
Hi, Greg. I'm back.
Welcome back, as always. Now, I want to get this out of the way straight off the bat. There's a couple of films that we're going to talk about on today's show that are particularly controversial. So, Ria, as you always do at the start of these Video Nasties shows, can you please read your lovely disclaimer?
Okay, will do. Warning, the following broadcast may contain spoilers, extreme language, violence, and topics considered graphic or adult, not for those of a sensitive disposition.
So, the reason I wanted to read that out right away is the first film we're actually going to talk about on this show is Driller Killer, which is one of the most infamous video nasties that there was at the time. So, this is directed by Abel Ferrara. Now, Abel Ferrara is one of my favourite directors from the 1990s, although this actually came out in the late 70s. So he is a director of such films as Miss 45, which is a rape revenge film, which is actually really good. It's actually not that sleazy by rape revenge standards. King of New York, starring Christopher Walken, which is a bit of a cult classic. The Addiction, which is a really cool vampire film. It's taking the vampire myth and doing something very slightly different with it. And Bad Lieutenant, which is his most well-known film. Now, this is actually Ferrara's first non-porn film that he directed. So he had directed pornographic films before this. And then he's also in this film himself. He plays the main character Reno under a pseudonym, Jimmy Lane. And it's written by his regular screenwriting partner, Nicholas St. John, who wrote most of his best films. However, I mean, this is probably his most infamous film, just based purely on the name alone, because the name is very lurid. I mean, it's just right there, Driller Killer. It's like, you pretty much get exactly what it says on the tin with this one.
Very catchy, and it rhymes. And of course, that amazing cover artwork that caught my attention many, many years back when way before I got into horror. So I think this film inspired my passion for horror, actually, because it's the first video nasty that I ever came across, and I thought it was really cool and controversial.
Oh no, definitely. It's a very, very eye-catching artwork there on the video sleeve, and indeed that artwork in itself, more than the actual film, was the reason that the video nasties movement even happened in the first place. So we have this film and the people who decide to advertise it by showing the homeless man with a drill embedded in his forehead bleeding out everywhere, which is really cool, I have to say. But yes, for people of a more sensitive disposition, as our disclaimer says, really not for them.
I would argue that this isn't as controversial as our second episode, or possibly third. But
ooh,
hey,
well now, hey. Yeah, as well. You have that to look forward to later on. This can be a debate that we have later on in the show. So, Ria, yes, this film is about a man who kills people with a drill, but is there more to the film than that?
Yes, there is. So it's a 1979 film, and the rough synopsis is an artist, a painter, going slowly insane whilst he's trying to pay his bills. He's broke. He lives with his girlfriend and her lover, her female lover, I think it is. And it's all during the period of punk rock in the mid-70s emerging in New York. And all of the insanity going on around him slowly drives him crazy, and he takes to the streets, killing homeless people or bums with a power drill.
So, that sums up the film really, really well. What I found interesting is literally the very first shot of the film is a disclaimer that says this film should be played loud.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's what's so cool. With all the punk music and the drill noises, why wouldn't you? It's just great that he's put that in there.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, there is a lot of punk rock in there, as we will discuss. So Ferrara is from New York. Now, his version of New York is very different from, let's say, Martin Scorsese's version of New York, or Spike Lee's, or Woody Allen's, or even someone like Frank Henenlotter, who all their films are based in New York. I would say, if anything, Ferrara is a combination of Scorsese and Henenlotter, because there's a lot of grime and decay, and there's a lot of homeless people, particularly in this film, of course. And there's a lot of Catholicism. Catholicism is very important in Ferrara's films, especially in Bad Lieutenant, and even in this to a certain degree, because the first scene of the film takes place in a church where you have an old man who we believe is Reno, who's the main character, his father, and him meeting his father, is a great shock to him, and that might be one of the reasons that it triggers, along with the various other things that happen in the film as well, like this killing spree that he goes on with a drill.
Yeah, so it's all this huge build-up to him just cracking in the end and going on his killing spree, which is built up so well, which is one of the things that surprised me about the film and one of the reasons why I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this film as well. It's a weird film because the first time I saw this, it was on Channel 4 a few years ago, and I was expecting like just a straight-up exploitation film, kind of like what I think Hobo with a Shotgun is supposed to be. Just like, it's a man with an implement and he's going around killing people, and that's basically all you get. But there's a lot more going on in this, and this is interesting because I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I think the film is very well directed. I think the dialogue is actually quite good. The acting, I'm not going to lie, is pretty ropey, but then again, you've probably got a lot of amateur performers who, the acting talent is not there. And some of the performances are quite funny.
Yeah. I agree with everything you've said, and I think it's an excellent concept for a film, especially with all the loud punk music just worked in there. It works really well. Like I say, the build up is very gradual. It keeps you interested, and then when he does go on his killing sprees, you've been given so many clues as to why he might, eventually break, and it's come across as so irritating as somebody watching the film that you understand why he's irritated, which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when the Roosters, who are the punk band in the film, when they arrive in the film, there's a lot of them playing. It's almost like like a rock documentary where you'll get like, the band doing stuff, and then it'll show them playing a song, and then it show them behind the scenes, and then them playing another song. Yeah. In a way, there's a good, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes of just the Roosters playing.
Yeah, I really think that it's structured very well in that sense because it's so monotonous, and it's the monotony of that drives him crazy, and he keeps complaining about it, and all other things going on, like he thinks his girlfriend is getting on him too much, she's nagging him a bit, so he's getting wound up with that, and just lots of other things going on that wind him up.
Like, he gets a phone bill and he goes, "What is this, the phone bill for Madison Square Garden?" And stuff like that.
He's a real New York wise guy.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I think one of the notes I've made for this film is I think these people are supposed to be beatniks. Because if you watch a lot of films from the 70s, they do talk in that really beatnik way. Like, yeah, man, it's the scene, man. We're going to do this, man. Yeah,
it's very true. And the way that they're dressed and everything.
Yeah, because the plot of the film in itself, what happens is, Reno, he's painted this picture of a buffalo. And did you think this was a good painting? I mean, I'm not an art expert or anything, but...
well, he was taking a very long time. He was doing the whole tortured artist thing. He was like, "It'll be finished when it's finished, all right?" To his girlfriend, she's like, "Hurry up and finish it because we need the money." And it was very detailed and quite cool looking. But it obviously wasn't what the art dealer was expecting, so he wasn't going to get paid, and that's why he ends up like sort of cracking. So yes, I thought the painting was good, but I'm not sure I would have purchased it myself to put on the wall.
No, I can't see why anyone would buy a massive picture of a buffalo. Like, where would you put that in your house?
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't have space for that.
Yeah, indeed. So he's painting a picture of a massive buffalo. And you've got this band playing downstairs at all hours. So, as you do when you're really stressed and you need money, you buy a cordless drill and you go on a massive killing spree, of course. Because why wouldn't you?
Well, there's that scene at the beginning where, so it's the chick, she's in her knickers. I've got written here, chicken knickers.
Love that.
She's just kind of, there's like a layabout around the house, isn't she? So it's that, the other girl, so not his girlfriend, the other girl. She wants him to put something up on the wall, and she gets him to do it with the drill, and this is before he kind of goes a bit nuts and he starts to break. So this is very, like, much earlier, and she keeps changing her mind about where she wants the hole being drilled.
Yeah, it was very, very indecisive, I've got to say. It's like she needs to just make up her fucking mind, damn it. Where do you want him to drill that hole in that door? It's like, come on now.
Well, she's just really, like, the reason I mentioned she's in a knickers, she's just really out of it, isn't she? She's just really like, oh, hey man, yeah, put it over there, put it over there, whatever. So she's just so spaced out and, like, not making any sense. She keeps changing her mind. And I just think that use of the drill at the beginning is, like, you know, just a clue as to where it's going.
Yeah, it's like Chekhov's gun, basically.
Yeah. So explain Chekhov's gun.
So Chekhov's gun is the theory that if you're watching a film or a play or in a book and there's a MacGuffin of sorts, and you introduce it in the first act, then it will be used by the end of the third act. So it's a gun because, well, if you see a gun in the first act, then that gun is going to, you know, shoot someone in the third act.
Ah, I see, yeah.
So obviously in this case, you place a gun with a drill.
Yep. Yeah. So, as per usual, I like to be body count girl, so I have got a list of the death count, which is what I like to do. With this, it was different, it was challenging than on our last show, which was all revolving around slasher films.
Yeah, so the difference in this film, obviously, is that everyone gets killed with the same weapon. Now, before you do before you are death count girl, as I know you love being, even though this film clearly wasn't made on a very high budget, I actually really liked the special effects because I thought they were quite realistic. I mean, how did you? Yeah,
me too. Yeah, I agree. I think I liked them. I thought it had a very good effect without being. It's not massively realistic, but it's realistic enough for me.
Well, there's no sort of obvious fake polystyrene heads like there were in the Dormant Drip Blood, for example.
Yeah. Exactly, and like when you watch the part where the guy's being drilled through the head, it is actually really kind of like you do wince, and it is quite sort of exciting in terms of like a horror death, and you wonder how they're going to do it. The blood, it's very well placed. The only thing that sort of made me question it, but I don't want to be too fussy because I do like that part of the film, is just that it's obvious that the drill bit isn't going in, it's just staying there, if you see what I mean.
Well, yeah, but how would you fake, like, being drilled in the head?
Well, now you would be able to do it. You would just get one that retracts in, you know, without actually going into the skull.
Yeah, like the Tom Savini thing, where you get an implement and it just goes in towards you instead of away from you.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. And when I was watching that, I was like, oh, right, okay, so they didn't do that. They just, like, let it stay. So it was still the same length, if you see what I mean. So now it's like we would have more attention to detail because, obviously, modern times. But it was still so effective, even though it wasn't doing that. But that was the one thing that, like, my brain was sort of like, no, like, that's not quite right.
So, take us away with the various deaths by drill.
Okay, yeah, so as per usual, I made a list, and then when I finished my list, I thought it was quite amusing because it kind of goes 1, homeless guy, drill. Death 2, homeless guy with drill. And then I've got death 3, crazy homeless guy at a bus shelter.
Yeah, now,
with a drill.
Yeah, lot of variety in the deaths in this film. Although I did really like the way that this scene was constructed, because as I said, this film, as I mentioned earlier, I feel it's very well directed, and this is one example of it, because you've got these people waiting at a bus stop, and there's this mental homeless man, possibly off his head on drugs, and he's just ranting and raving absolute nonsense. So you wonder, where's this going? Where's this going? Where's this going? And then he gets killed in this very creative way because Reno is stood behind the bus shelter and he drills through the plastic of the bus shelter into the guy's back and kills him that way. Yeah,
it's a bit bizarre, isn't it? I think the first time that I watched this, which is possibly, I think it was in my late teens, I found that part really scary, actually. Just because the homeless guy is so crazy. He's going off on one, and it just feels very unpredictable at that point. It's like, what's going to happen?
Wow. Yes, but I mean, if you've lived in Croydon as long as I have, you're kind of used to seeing things like that, so it probably wouldn't bother me that much.
It didn't bother me on my most recent watch, but I did find it creative, as you say. So I have 11 deaths in total, And mostly my list goes homeless guy with drill, but then there are a couple that I picked out here. So homeless guy number 7, I believe he's asleep in the rubbish, in the trash. And he drills him in the head whilst he's asleep. Did you notice that one?
Yeah, I mean, there was a big spree because Reno and his girlfriend and the friend, they go to a Roosters concert. So that's probably another thing that really drives him over the edge, is that he's had to hear these guys play for all day and all night. And then it's like, yeah, let's go to a concert. Let's see them in front of a crowd of people. It's like, okay.
I like how there's only this one band in the whole of New York. You know, they had to go to that.
Yeah, and what I found quite funny is while Reno's there, while the band's playing, he's talking to the friend whose name's Pamela, and I think the insinuation is that she's saying that he should go gay for pay, like with the art dealer, like so in order to get him to sell his painting. So, and then after that, he sneaks away, and yeah, he does go on a really mad killing spree. He kills, I don't know how many people it is in total. It's like 5 people or something in a very short space of time.
Yeah. And then there's that part of the film where none of them have food and he buys them a pizza.
Now, I thought this was quite amusing because he eats it very, very, very sloppily, and also he doesn't eat pizza crusts. Now, I eat pizza crusts. I actually quite like the crusts. So I actually found that quite amusing because his girlfriend basically goes mental at him because he hasn't eaten his crusts. She just storms out.
Well, no.
It's far too much.
See, I'm agreeing with her because because I'd be mad too if some dickhead ate all the pizza when there was no food in the house, you know. And he's just doing it in front of them and not really offering them any. And then he does this really shit I'm sorry painting, which looks like it's been done by a 5-year-old, as if that's going to make up for the fact that he ate all the pizza in front of them without offering any. So she's not mad about the crust, she's mad because he ate the whole fucking thing. He stuffed it into his face, basically. So, yeah, I'd be pretty mad too, like, that guy's a douche.
And then, I believe at this point, there's a random homeless man that appears, like, at the bottom, on the bottom floor of where they're living. Yes, it's like, who is this guy? Where did this guy come from? It really, really confused me.
Yeah, I got really confused with that as well, and I was like, well, what's the point of it? Because they kept sort of cutting back to him, and he seems really like OTT, you know, a bit kind of savage. He's like really sort of causing a fuss down there, and then it takes ages for them to get to the point where he's actually more relevant and he's not just kind of circling at the bottom of the stairs. So it is very strange. What is that about? Why the build up on that?
I don't know. That's a very random sort of choice. Just to have some random homeless man appear, like, and just stay at the bottom of their flat. It's just, it's very odd.
Think maybe he's like the end boss, where like they've built up.
He's like the end boss of homeless people.
Yeah, he's just like, you know, he's kind of mastered the bus.
Well, he doesn't kill any homeless people after he kills that guy. So maybe you're right. Maybe he is like sort of the. Yeah, like you said, the final boss of homeless people that he must defeat before moving on to other characters in the film that we've actually got to know throughout the course of the film.
Yeah, because he's really crazy and like erratic, so that would make sense.
Now, what I thought was interesting, before we kind of go on to like the end of the film, is he doesn't actually kill any of the roosters. I thought he was going to kill them at some point, and he never did.
They kind of deserved it because they're not a very good band anyway, so...
Well, one of the songs they were playing, they were using a bass line that just sounded like the Blues Brothers. It's that dun 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 dun. It's like, that's the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well.
I thought that was quite funny.
I really liked that part. It was just like a very short scene, or short. Sorry, can't talk.
Put your teeth in.
Very short scene. Short of is the part where he is kind of moving his hair as though he's in a L'Oreal advert, but he's like covered in blood all down his face, and he's like swinging his hair about, and it's just kind of very sort of just setting the mood for like he's enjoying killing, but it's actually not like part of any of the scenes where he has killed. It's just like an extra part. Did you pick up on that one?
Yeah, so I really, really like those scenes. So these are hallucinations that Reno has. Like, well, he has a couple. He has one near the start of the film and one about 2/3 of the way through the film, where, as you said, he has these visions of him sort of, with blood flying on him. And yeah, like he's in a shampoo commercial. I didn't think of it like that, but I can't get that out of my head now, so thanks. I really like that scene until you told me that.
Because he's worth it.
Well, exactly. But I really like the way it's shot. I really like the use of red. This is something I've mentioned on a previous show. Like anything that involves sort of fluorescent red lighting and a really, really cool sort of eerie, like boom, 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 Reno, like that kind of score going on in the background. I thought that was very, very well done. I really enjoyed those scenes.
Very gritty, very edgy, very, very much sort of punk film. I liked it. Like you say, the low budget kind of adds to it, and the low budget special effects, without detracting away from the fact that, without sort of causing it to be too amateur.
Yeah, exactly, because this is the weird thing about this film, because as I mentioned earlier, it's very low budget, and the acting is pretty shocking at times. Particularly,
a little bit ropey.
It's a bit ropey, yeah. Particularly Pamela, who's the friend. She there's a conversation that she has in a ladies' toilet with, I think they're supposed to be the girlfriends of the band, and it was just, oh god, it was horrendous.
Yeah.
And also the guy who plays the art dealer, I don't know what sort of film he was in, but he was so over the top and so effeminate. It was just like, there's when Reno finally does show him this painting of a buffalo that he's been working on for so long, like the art dealer, he comes out with such cracking lines as just like, worthless, and this is nothing, it's just a goddamn buffalo. And it's just like, it's so funny.
I quite liked that because it was so over the top, and the acting didn't offend me very much. Like, I did think the friend, the girl, she was a bit drippy and spaced out, but I thought that did add to it. That was sort of meant to be like that, like in my opinion.
I actually think it adds to the film, personally. I actually think that, taking it away from Driller Killer for a sec, like Grindhouse, like the Tarantino Roberto Rodriguez film, and indeed a film like sort of Machete or Hobo with a shotgun. Yeah. I think one of the problems I have with those films is they're supposed to be like this. That's what they're trying to do. It's this Grindhouse aesthetic, but those films are far too polished and they're far too digitized and far too commercial, and the acting is too good. Yeah. This is a proper Grindhouse film.
Yeah, it is. And I think I was so focused on watching Abel Ferrara acting through this, and he's not an amazing actor, but he really brings something to this film. His character's just great in this, even though his acting isn't, perfect or polished. Like you say, it does add to it. So I was so focused on watching him that I didn't mind too much about the other characters. So yeah. I've got death. So of our 11 deaths, the final 3 is the art dealer over the buffalo painting, where he invites him round, which I thought was quite a good plot twist. I saw that coming, and I wanted him to do it, so it was satisfying when it did happen.
Exactly.
And then I did question whether, so the flatmate, the drippy girl, he does seem to kill her, but I think it's off screen. But I'm going to say that he did kill her, because I think he did.
Yeah, I think it's heavily implied that he kills her. But what I think is interesting about this film, particularly in comparison to the next film that we're going to talk about, is that we don't see any women die on screen. All the deaths are against men. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I did notice that about the homeless people, that they're all men. And I thought, well, it mostly is like that, I think, in the world. But particularly back then in the 70s, maybe that was the case. But it did strike me how all throughout the beginning of the film, it's just all directed towards men.
Yeah, so, I mean, for all the kind of vitriol that's kind of placed against this film, you definitely can't say it's, misogynistic, because it's not at all.
Very true. So, it's got a great ending to this film. What did you make of it?
Yeah, so Carol, Reno's girlfriend, she leaves him near the end of the film, and she goes back to, now I think this is supposed to be her ex-husband. His name's Stephen, who is that's a very ex-husbandy kind of name for someone to have, Stephen.
Well, there's that great scene where he's in the street with a suitcase, and he's like, you need your suitcase, and he's really having a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, he really, really wanted her to be all right, I guess. I mean, he did care about her in his own sort of strange way, even though he was very fixated on like getting the painting done and all his problems. Yeah, he obviously did care about her. But anyway, irrespective of that, she did leave him anyway. And she goes back to her ex-husband. And unfortunately, Stephen doesn't last very long in the film. So he is on camera for about a minute. And then Reno appears and kills him with a drill.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the film. And then, so he kills him with the drill, as we expected. Why wouldn't he? You know, why break habit of the entire film? And then he goes into the bedroom and he hides in the bed, and it's kind of dark in there. So she comes in assuming that it is this Stephen guy, her ex, and she climbs into bed and she's just sort of snuggling up to him. And it's just great how there's like, at the end of the film ends in darkness because she's turned out the light and she's got into bed, so you don't know what's going to happen. And it's just that whispering in the dark, so it's all very sort of tense at the end. And that's where it finishes. I just thought that was just such a brilliant way to end the film.
Yeah, exactly. It ends on a very ambiguous note because you don't know what's going to happen. It leaves you in suspense because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? He's going to kill her, and then it just ends. Now, I know some people would probably hate that if you want like a conclusive ending, but that's not the point of the film.
Yeah, I thought it was very clever. So, yeah.
Yes, I really enjoyed that.
Highly recommend this film myself as well.
Yeah, I mean, I said I really like this film. There are bits about it that are not great, admittedly. Like, I know you said that you felt the pacing was good. I actually found the pacing a bit uneven, and that's because of the deliberately monotonous nature of some of the scenes, particularly when the band were playing. I think because I didn't really like the music myself, I just got a bit frustrated kind of when they were playing. It's just like, hurry up. So yeah, I can imagine.
It does feel a little bit like that, but I put that down to his lack of experience with directing, you know, seeing as though this is his first film of that kind. I just thought it does require a little bit of patience, but it is worth it if you watch the film all the way through and you sort of keep up with why they're putting those scenes in there. So yeah, I see what you mean. It can be a little slow in places.
Yeah, although despite that, obviously it's very infamous for good reason, and I think the film did try and make up for the slow parts by having like Reno go on a mad frenzy where he killed about 5 people in the space of like 2 minutes, which I thought was quite amusing. Yeah, the film I think is well written, it's very well directed. I think the score is very good and works with the film, and the acting, despite it being pretty amateurish for the most part, actually works really well with the whole aesthetic of the film. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the film is mostly not exploitative or misogynistic, but there's a scene in the shower where you've got Pamela and Carol getting it on, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a bit crowbarred in there, admittedly. Not that I have a problem with naked women, obviously, but I thought...
It wasn't entirely necessary, was it? It wasn't needed.
It was not integral to the plot, shall we say, but
yeah.
Welcome nonetheless. Now, the big question, and this one I think is going to be quite interesting, because I don't know what your opinion is, but would you say that this is a video nasty?
Ooh, this is really tough. I was on the fence about this at first, but I think I'm going to go with yes. It should be video nasty.
Now, my opinion is, again, I was kind of on the fence, but I've gone with no. Now, why would you say yes?
Well, I thought really, really long and hard about this. It was a tough decision. But I just think, the nature of the power tools and the way it's shown with the deaths and the killing of random people on the street, I just think it should be banned, and it was banned because it is so violent. So yeah, just literally due to the violence.
I mean, how I feel about it is, well, first of all, it's available in the UK through Arrow, as a lot of these video nasties are, and it's available uncut. So if you want to buy it, you can see it in its totally uncut form on both DVD and Blu-ray through Arrow, as I said. And based on that, there are a couple of deaths that are very gruesome, like particularly the drill through the forehead. I think that one is probably the most grisly of the deaths in the film. However, I don't know, I thought about it and I thought the tone of the film wasn't... It's a downbeat film, but I wouldn't say it's particularly nasty or nihilistic. And I think because the film is of artistic merit, I kind of took that into consideration as well when I thought I probably wouldn't categorise this as a video nasty, although I can totally see why it was. In my opinion, I don't think it should have been, personally.
Yeah, well, by today's standards, I don't think it's all that surprising, but I think the nature of the film is so gritty and violent that, yeah, that's why I've picked yes, but I can totally see why if it was made today and released, it really wouldn't have the same impact and it wouldn't be banned. But I still think that it's up there, it's deemed violent enough to be a video nasty, so I'm going to stick with yes.
Well, yeah, by all means, if you like the sound of what you've heard and you want to check Driller Killer out, if you haven't seen it already, please by all means do, because we both really enjoyed it. So yeah, check that one out. Right, so the next film that we're going to talk about, and this one might be quite an interesting discussion, this is The Toolbox Murders, and this is directed by Dennis Donnelly, who I believe this is the only film that he ever made. Possibly with good reason, although I don't know. So, Ria, take us through what happens in The Toolbox Murders.
Okay, so it's a 1978 film, and it's basically a guy in a ski mask who's a maniac, and he goes around an apartment complex killing the tenants with the contents of a toolbox. So, unlike Driller Killer, it's not the same weapon, it's all different ones from his toolbox. And then, after he has ensued with the killings, he then kidnaps a girl and keeps her captive. And I believe, I'm not quite sure now how they're related, so I'll have to go into that. But he does kidnap a girl, hold her captive, and yeah, I won't go into the rest of the plot.
No. So that is basically the first half of the film. Now, I'm going to come straight off the bat. I did not enjoy this film. I don't know how you feel about it, but I had several issues with the film itself. One of the issues I had was the pacing of the film. Now, as we're going to discuss, pretty much all the murders in the film happen in the first 30 minutes. And then after that, the film really, really, really drags. It kind of goes screeching to a grinding halt, which I think one of the reasons for that is I noticed at the start of the film has 3 screenwriters. Now, I, at one point in my life, did want to be a screenwriter myself, and one thing I've noticed is films that have more than 2 screenwriters, there's often a problem where the film feels like it's multiple films trying to fight for attention in the same film. So what you have is you have a very, very misogynistic, nihilistic, sleazy first third of the film, and then you've got this kind of really annoying, really shit kind of these 2 boys trying to work out what's happened to one of the boys' sisters. There's that, and then there is essentially the kidnap part, which is a little bit more exciting. I did kind of think that part was of merit, but they're 3 completely different films going on at the same time, and that was a bit jarring.
Yeah, it does feel like 3 entirely different sections. I thought this was okay. I didn't enjoy it that much, same as you, but my favourite part was the beginning part with all of the deaths from the toolbox, which is what I wanted the film to be all the way through, really. So I did pull out some positives in that. I thought the deaths were creative and interesting in that first section, and I quite like the uneasy way that he's kind of humming in like a sort of tranquil, almost like he's one of the 7 dwarfs going off to work.
Okay.
He's like,
oh dear,
got a jolly little hum going on, and it's quite unsettling because he's doing such kind of morbid acts, but he's always keeping this jolly tone as though he's just got to do another task in his day, which I found that quite disturbing and unsettling. So for me, that was something that I found different and it stood out in the film. Like
I can't believe you. I can't believe that you've mentioned the Toolbox murders in the same sentence as the dwarfs from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I think that might be the first time in history those two movies have been mentioned in the same sentence.
Hey, it's me. What do you expect?
There aren't actually that many deaths in the film, are there?
Let's see. So the body count for this one is 8. So I think that's quite a lot. Yeah.
Wow.
Quite a lot.
There's actually more deaths than I thought.
Yeah, there are 8. So for me, that's quite a quantitative amount.
Okay, so of the deaths in the film, so we have as I said, I mentioned this earlier, but one of the issues I have with the film, and I want to be fair with this, because I know a lot of these films get a bad rap for being sexist and for hating women and being misogynistic and all that, and sometimes I think that's a bit over the top, but I think in this film's case it's actually quite accurate and probably fair to say that, because if you look at the deaths, in that first 30 minutes, particularly the last one, where you've got the woman, masturbating in the bath to some really bad country music, and then she gets killed with a nail gun.
Yeah, so bad.
I found particularly leery and particularly sexist, just because it's so protracted, and it just feels really dirty, and it actually does feel genuinely quite nasty, these deaths. It's not stylish. So in for example, something like The Burning, which we talked about in the last show, or even Dawn That Dripped Blood, or Night School, in fact all 3 of those films, where the killings are done in a manner that's quite stylish, these are not really very stylish. They're very brutal.
Yeah, well, like I say, I've liked the creativity with the weapons, with the death, but the masturbation scene in the bath, I absolutely hated that part. It's like they saved up their most glamorous actress. She had the most makeup on, and it was just so, cheap and everything, the way that they went about that scene. And then he breaks in while she's doing that in the bath, and then kills her. And the way that he kills her, she sort of runs out of the bath, and then so she's not wearing anything, and she's kind of clutching a pillow in front of us to preserve her modesty a bit, but we know she's not going to get away. It's just not possible. And it's just so cheap, and it's just so fake and drawn out, and I just hate that scene. I hate it.
I believe the actress that plays that character is actually a porn star.
That would make a lot of sense.
Which kind of, as you said, would kind of make sense as to why she's so comfortable. It's quite funny, actually. In one scene, what I was going to say was, I found it quite amusing that in this block of flats, there only seem to be beautiful women. That's the only people who seem to live there. And also, you have women who are quite willing to dance in front of a window wearing just their underwear, to no one in particular.
Yeah, I can see why you hated this film. It took me a while to realise that it was just going to be all women, but the bath scene is the pinnacle of that. And the country music, I believe it's a song called Pretty Lady. I've jotted that down after I watched it. Just absolutely appalling. It's like, what the hell is this song?
It sounds like a bad Dolly Parton song. That's what it does. It's just, I don't know. Yeah.
Warbling away.
It was horrendous. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it did make me laugh when she was clutching this pink pillow, this cushion off the sofa that she was trying to sort of hide from the killer. And it's like, well, don't think it really matters. He's already seen you, and it's not going to help you running away. But hey, who knows what you'd do in that situation?
And I think what was also a problem is the women in that first half an hour do actually act really dumb in a lot of ways. So, for example, the first woman that dies, the killer just goes into her flat just wearing black gloves. He doesn't even have his mask on at that point, and he's holding a drill. And this woman is at no point suspicious as to why this man is suspiciously entered her flat with a drill, and wearing gloves. It's like, I don't know. I would be a bit suspicious, but clearly this woman didn't think so.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, terrible. But it sounds like you got more wound up about the misogyny than I did. I'm proud of you.
Fair enough. That isn't how it's meant to come across. I'm not sort of trying to be like...
It is really irritating the way they're portrayed to be so dumb, but in a way I think I've kind of gotten used to this with a lot of horror films that I've watched, and it's just kind of part and parcel, but it is particularly irritating in this, and that bath scene was totally like over the top and uncalled for.
One of the other issues I had with this film, as you can tell, I really didn't like this film very much, everybody. Yeah. I'm really sorry.
You go on with your bad self and carry on.
Thank you. One of the problems I had with the film, amongst the misogyny and the lurid sort of sexist feel of the first 30 minutes, is the film, let me try and think the right way to put this. So slasher films were accused of being very conservative in their nature. So for example, something like Friday the 13th, as we discussed on the last show, the idea is if you have sex with someone, that's bad and therefore you must die. This is kind of a more extreme version of that. So the main character is very religious. He's a very religious character, and he talks about God a lot and how he's punishing sinners and people for their wicked ways and things like that. Now, fair enough. On one hand, you've got this character talking about that, and you've got these women who are very sexual and things like that, but the film has no problem portraying those women in a very sexual way, particularly the scene we mentioned earlier in the bath. So it's happy to be very exploitative and kind of enjoy that side of it, but then at the same time punish the characters, and it's like, well, you must die for being for enjoying yourself sexually and things like that. So it's like, come on, that is so hypocritical, that's ridiculous.
It's just all a cheap thrill. He was throwing it in there for a cheap thrill, in my opinion.
Is this just me? I kind of thought you would be a little bit more enthusiastic about this. I was like,
I just think I expected it. I just think I expected it. It doesn't surprise me. Yeah, they've got porn stars in there. That's so predictable. You can tell there's like a poster that I found online, or I think it's the cover for the movie, like the original artwork, and it's just got that scene with her in the bath, and she's just covering one of her nipples with one hand, and he's behind her with the drill bit. So that drill bit was interesting because it wasn't one of those standard, the thin one like was in Driller Killer. It's that one with like a paddle on the end, so it's like wider. So it's like, interesting choice there. So he's got that, and then it says the Toolbox murders underneath with like the toolbox leaking blood below, and it's just like they were building that film towards that one scene, and they saved the best porn star for that, and they were just going to market the whole thing on that. So it just doesn't surprise me. It's like, that's exactly what I expected.
Well, one positive of the film is we're learning about power tools.
Yeah, I don't know what that one with the paddle on the end is called, but hey, good use of that. Nice use of, we've got what? So the first death was a car crash, which was a flashback. Second death was drill through the door. And the third death was a claw hammer. Points for creativity there. Then her friend gets stabbed with a screwdriver. And then the bath girl gets the nail gun, which I didn't pick up that it was a nail gun straight away because it's quite a strange shape. I don't know if you thought that.
No, I thought it was pretty... obviously, I'm an expert on nail guns, but yeah, I kind of thought that it was pretty standard. I kind of worked out what it was sort of pretty much straight away when he started firing nails at her. So
fair enough. And then we've got... So death 6 was... So one of the guys gets burnt to death, which is then where it changes the pace and it's like a totally different film.
Right, I have to stop you at this point because I hated that scene. Again, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about this film, but this scene, I didn't hate it, obviously, because it's two guys this time, but I just thought that scene was really stupid. So what you have to understand is the plot at this point in the film is, so Laurie, who's the 15-year-old girl, has been kidnapped by I think he's the building supervisor or the landlord of the building where all these murders are taking place. It's really obvious that it's him. It's not really a spoiler because you find out literally in the first 30 minutes that that's who it is. So not really a spoiler. So her brother, who's called Joey, and Kent, who is the nephew of the landlord, basically go on this really weird investigation, which seems to take about 20 or 30 minutes to try and find out what happened to this guy's sister. and nothing really happens during this point. It kind of turns into what I've described in my notes as a really bad Hardy Boys mystery. Because it's like, oh, there's a clue. Let's go and investigate said clue.
Nice, okay. Well,
and then what happens... Sorry, and then what happens is that... now, this is a bit of a spoiler, but it turns out that Kent is just as crazy as his uncle. So he, Joey... who's the worst actor in the whole film. He's terrible. You will not be surprised to learn that the actor who plays Joey did not appear in any films after this because of his great performance in this film. He discovers that said toolbox that, that has been used to murder all these people. And he says, Kent, well, it was your uncle. He did it. Now, instead of doing what a normal person would do, find the toolbox and then kind of immediately try and run away and call the police or do what a normal person would do, he just kind of stands there like a dopey idiot. And when Kent turns up, he tries to say to him, well, look, it was your uncle. And Kent's like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, I really hated this part of the film too. It's just so slow, and it's like, it's just going to send you to sleep. It's just so disjointed and makes no sense. But I know you got really riled with the first part of the film with all the killings, but I found that was the best part. The part that really riled me was the bit where he'd kidnapped her and he's got her tied to the bed and he's got that lollipop and he's saying Papa loves you. I found that really sick. Like, I was just like, this is disgusting. I just can't watch it. I don't see how this is interesting with the film. And it was really like making her seem really young, like a little girl with the lollipop and everything. It was just really sick, like it was playing into his fantasy of that. I just hated that part. I didn't want to watch it. I was just like, ugh.
Wow. Now, you see, I didn't actually hate that bit that much, to be honest. So we both hate this film, but for different reasons.
Oh, I just thought that part was really scummy.
Yeah. I mean, that I thought, to be honest, I get what you're saying about the murders. Those parts were, despite what I said earlier, they were kind of the excitement of the film. And a lot of people criticise the film for this exact reason, where you've got all this action in the first 30 minutes and then nothing happens pretty much for the rest of the film.
Yeah, if they'd have ended it after that and been like, pulled his ski mask off and been like, oh, it's the uncle, he's the killer, and then finished it there, I'd have been quite happy. But like, then I had to go through the man being burnt to death, his friend being stabbed, and then the girl being tied to the bed with the lollipop. And all that was just like, there were no tools in it. I didn't want to watch that part.
Oh dear. Yeah, I think we've spoken enough about this film, to be honest. So I kind of want to wrap this one up because I think it's a piece of shit film. But basically, long story short, it turns out that Kent is just as mental as his uncle. They get into a fight. The uncle dies. And then you're left with Kent and Laurie, and then you think that Kent is going to save Laurie, but no, because this film isn't sleazy enough, he then basically has to rape Laurie, but at least that happens off screen. Thank God for that.
Oh, gross, yeah.
But then, she does get her revenge. She does kill him. But unfortunately, instead of giving the audience this satisfaction, it's like, well, this girl basically got raped. Instead of having him die on screen, instead he dies off screen, which is like, okay, this is horribly mean-spirited. It's like, again, not giving the audience kind of what they want. There's no kind of happy resolution there, even though it should, in theory, be a good ending because the girl managed to get away.
Yeah,
but no,
she walks out off into the distance in a red bloodstained dress, but the whole rape scene before that is just gross as well, so...
Yeah, even though you don't see anything, it's still really, really, really horrid and sleazy because we know the girl's only 15 as well, which is a problem.
Yeah, it's horrible. So yeah, not a very satisfying ending, in my opinion.
No, and then to make things worse at the end, they have to tell us that this film is based on events that actually happened, and it's like, oh, for God's sake.
Which it's not. It's all a marketing ploy.
Anytime a film tells you that something is based on real events, we've learned through, if you watch enough horror films in your life as we have, we know, no, it's not. Fuck off. Stop trying to tell me that.
Very tenuous link to something that was possibly true, but not. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So this should be a pretty easy question based on this. I'm going to say I believe that I agree this should have been a video nasty.
I agree as well, just with the gross rape scene and the bath scene and everything. Would not fly these days.
No, and it's very interesting that you've said that because this film has never actually been re-released in the UK. Now, it was released by Vipco. Now, I've never brought up Vipco on this show before. Now, Vipco, in the 80s, they were a video company and they released DVDs in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And they were the label in the UK who used to release video nasties, so they had quite a few of the video nasties available on their label. However, a lot of the time they were cut, which is one of the problems, because obviously with your video nasty collectors, obviously they want the uncut versions. Now, in my notes, I can see that yes, this was released by Vipco in the early 2000s, but it was cut by 1 minute and 45 seconds. Which is quite a lot, quite hefty cuts sort of to be made there, and it has never been re-released. Now, I believe that even if it was re-released, due to the nature of the first 30 minutes, as I discussed in great detail earlier, I believe it would still be cut, just because sexual violence, particularly you've got a scene where the woman who gets killed with a nail gun, you've got blood going over her breasts, which is a big no-no to the BBFC.
Oh, really?
Yep, they still don't like that.
Oh, I've looked at the ratings for these films, by the way, on IMDb, and it's all totally backwards. Like, of the three we're discussing on this show, the one we like the most gets the least. Driller Killer gets 5, and Toolbox Murders, which we just discussed, gets 5.3. How is this possible? Anyway.
Anyway, exactly. Well, yeah, people who rate on IMDb are mostly stupid. I've kind of learnt this over the years. So, yeah. A lot of films get bad ratings that don't deserve it, and vice versa. So, interesting diversion, because the Toolbox Murders, the first film that we're going to talk about on the show, has actually been remade. So it was remade in the early 2000s by Tobe Hooper, the famous director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And because everything has to be linked to Rob Zombie in some way on this show, one of the stars of the remake of the Toolbox Murders is Sherry Moon Zombie.
Is this for the benefit of me, because I'm such a die-hard fan and I love Sherry, so...
Exactly. And it's for your benefit that she's in the film, but it's for my benefit that she dies in the first 5 minutes.
Greg! Fucking hell. No. One of us here likes 31 and one of us doesn't. Can you guess who that is?
No, in fairness, like, I don't know, she's not in the film long enough to really have that great of an impact. Now, I saw...
But she's very lovely, though.
I'm sure she is. I'm sure she's really nice. I'm sure she's an absolute delight. But she is... Well, at least she wasn't a very good actress in Mr. Zombie's first few films. Let's put it that way. She has got better over time. You know, practice does make perfect and all that. But anyway, going back to the Toolbox Murders remake, I've seen this very recently, and it's hard to say if the remake is actually better than the original or not. I don't think it's that much worse. I mean, it's certainly not as nihilistic, it's certainly not as sleazy, and I think what they tried to do is they tried to make the plot make more sense. Have you seen the remake of the Toolbox Murders?
I saw it a long while back. I remember that I enjoyed it. I thought it was better than the original. And I can't remember exactly, but I really hope that they sort of cut that bit out at the end of the film where it goes off tangent into the kidnapping scene and just stuck to the Toolbox Murder. So I think that's what happens, but I can't exactly remember.
Yeah, so basically what happens in the remake is, and this is a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen who wants to see the remake of the Toolbox Murders, is that instead of the murderer being sort of the landlord or one of the people who are the tenants of the apartment block, is actually some kind of monster man, is the best way I can think to describe him. So it's some guy who is kind of like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, some kind of like indestructible killer, basically, which I thought was a bit boring, to be honest.
I can see why they went down that route. It does seem like the obvious choice, or that it would make a very good formula for that kind of film. That sounds like a much better concept than the original to me.
Yes, and the film does star Angela Bettis, who is actually a very good actress. She is most famous for being in the film May by Lucky McKee, which I really like, actually. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen it, but I heard that it's very, very good.
Oh, it is. It's really good. I highly recommend it. That's enough Toolbox murders for one day. I think we've slaughtered that film enough. So we're going to move on now to our final film. Now this one, I'm happy to say, is a lot less nihilistic than the previous two films that we've talked about on the show, and this is The Cannibal Man. So this is also known as Week of the Killer and The Apartment on the 13th Floor. Now the title of this film is actually quite interesting because it's a Spanish film and the direct translation of the Spanish title is Week of the Killer. However, for reasons, I suppose for marketing reasons, I guess, they decided to call it The Cannibal Man.
Yeah, it's entirely a marketing ploy because there's no cannibalism in this film whatsoever, which is kind of disappointing given the title.
So this is not like Cannibal Holocaust or Cannibal Ferox or any of the films that we've talked about previously on this show. In fact, this only has one very, very, very indirect kind of cannibal moment in it, and that's more for ironic effect, really, more than anything else. If you're looking for cannibal tribes, you're looking in the wrong place, I'm afraid. But
that's episode 2.
Exactly, episode 2 and 3.
Yeah.
They're the places to go. So this was directed by Eloy de la Iglesia, who is actually, from what I've read, he was quite a prominent director in the 70s, and he was known for having very strong pro-homosexual and pro-communist views, which do actually come across very well in this film.
Given that one of the characters has a dog called Trotsky, I would agree.
Yes, exactly. It's interesting, one of the interpretations I've seen of this film is it's actually about a man coming to terms with his sexuality and coming out, which, given what actually happens in the film, I would probably agree with, actually. But we can discuss that as we go along. So, Ria, tell us what happens in Cannibal Man.
Okay, so the synopsis. So it's a 1972 film. This is quite obscure. I'd not heard of this before we did the show. So the basic synopsis is a young guy called Marco. He is working as a butcher and he accidentally kills a taxi driver whilst he's having an argument with his girlfriend. She wants him to go to the police to turn himself in. So he kills her too, and then he goes on a bit of a killing spree because it all escalates from there. And yeah, I think that's the plot, basically.
Yeah, so that is essentially the plot in a nutshell. So unlike the killers in our previous two films, this is more of a reluctant killer. He kills more to protect himself so he doesn't have to go to the police because he's scared of going to jail. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very political film. So one of the interesting aspects of the film is our main character, Marcos. He is poor, whereas his girlfriend and some of the other characters in the film are rich. So he believes because he's poor, he will be unfairly treated by the police, and he might, say, for example, have to serve a longer spell in jail than a rich person would. And there's a couple of scenes in this film that are actually quite interesting that kind of tie that together. So hence, that is kind of one of his reasons for committing these murders. However, that being said, I don't know how you feel about this, but I thought, well, he did accidentally kill the taxi driver. He didn't mean to kill the taxi driver, and then he goes and he just kills his girlfriend, pretty much. He strangles her to death.
Yeah, he could have
It's pretty savage.
He could have just maybe asked her to keep it to herself for a bit instead of doing that, you know?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what a normal person would do. But that would make a very interesting film, unfortunately. That film would last about 10 minutes.
Yeah, it all gets a bit out of hand, but as per usual, I've counted up the body count, and it says, like I said, this is a very obscure film. It's quite difficult to find information about. It's quite difficult to find, and it's quite ropey looking when you watch it, and very, very slow. So I wasn't too keen on this film. Yeah, as I say, the death count is predicted or reviewed online as being high, but then when I actually counted them up, we only have 5, and I think 4 of them are on screen and 1 of them is off screen. So at first I thought it was 4. So it doesn't seem like that many compared to the first 2 that we discussed, but it is 5 in total.
Yeah, so really, like, all the deaths in the film, as you said, can be kind of reviewed as Marcos, he accidentally kills a taxi driver. His girlfriend asks him to go to the police. He won't go to the police, so he kills her and hides her body. And then his brother turns up, and his brother discovers the body, and his brother tries to convince Marcos to go to the police, and he won't do it, so he kills his brother, as you do.
Yeah.
And then his brother's wife turns up and she discovers the body of his girlfriend and his brother, and hence she gets killed. So that's now 3 people dead.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, that's quite... The parts that I noticed that were quite unsettling, the bits that sort of affected me the most, which ties in with the first 2 that we've discussed, is like there's like a lot of sort of sound effects of unsettling noises. So like in the first one, in the first one we reviewed, Driller Killer, there's all that build up with all of the loud noises and unsettling noises. In the second one, the killer was sort of whistling a merry tune, which was quite unsettling. In this one, it's kind of like really weird sound effects, like kind of popping noises, like digital sound effects. It just makes it sound a little bit insane. And then when he's committed the kills, he like tucks them up in bed to hide them. But it's quite unsettling the way he does it, like he's sort of, putting his kids to bed or something. It's really strange.
Yeah, I took that as in he didn't want to look at their faces because he was ashamed of what he's done, which again kind of makes him different from the previous 2 films in that, as I said, he's a reluctant killer. But
then at the end, I think they're turned to face him so that when the brother walks into the room, they're facing outwards again. So it's like they've been moved and they've got all blood down their shirts and everything. So it does look really creepy because they're just sat in bed together. It's just very strange. Quite a cool idea to put in there.
Yeah, I agree. Which then leads on to the 5th death in the film, which is Carmen's dad. So Carmen is his brother's wife. So his brother's wife's dad turns up to try and find his daughter and try and sort of have a few words with Steve, because Steve is a bit of a cad. And then he gets the most infamous death in the film, which is the meat cleaver to the face.
Yeah, that was quite a brutal sort of standout death. And then you sort of see the shadow of him in the background where he's sort of adding to what he's already done with the cleaver, which is cleverly done.
Yeah, I really liked the way that this film was shot. It was shot with a lot of skill. Particularly, there was a scene once all the murders have taken place and Marcos is going in there to try and dismember the bodies because he tries to dispose of the bodies in the film because one thing we haven't mentioned is he works in a slaughterhouse. So right at the start of the film you have these scenes of cows being killed in a slaughterhouse, like an abattoir.
Yeah, one of the scenes at the beginning, there's a whole cow hung up and they're cutting it in half down the middle. That is quite unsettling.
Yes, which is very similar because there's slaughterhouse footage in other films. Particularly, there's a documentary called Blood of Beasts by Georges Franju, and also a film by Werner Fassbinder called In a Year with 13 Moons, which also has slaughterhouse footage that I actually found more disturbing than this because it's a lot longer and a lot more protracted. This was actually quite quick by animal death standards, particularly when you're viewing a slaughterhouse. So it didn't really bother me that much in comparison to other similar scenes that I've seen in other films. But the reason it's so important that I bring this up is that he tries to dispose of his kills by taking their flesh and disposing it in the slaughterhouse with the other meat.
Yeah, okay. So he doesn't manage to succeed, does he?
Well, no, because what happens is, so he goes to this cafe on a quite regular basis and he flirts with one of the waitresses called Rosa, who is actually the final person who dies in the film. And he, orders some food, and it turns out that he ends up eating like the body of the flesh of one of the people that he's actually murdered inadvertently, which I think is why the film is called The Cannibal Man, because that's the only scene of like kind of cannibalism in the film. And to be honest, it might not even have been like one of the people. It may have just been cow. It might have been beef, but he's not to know that and he freaks out. Yeah,
no, it is implied, isn't it? Now I see the connection. Yeah, I think you're right. I hadn't realised that, but yes, it is very subtly implied. And when he starts dating Rosa from the cafe, it brings with it a lot of these sort of cringy love scenes, like where she's trying to seduce him, which in the same way as the previous one that we reviewed, Toolbox Murders, it does get a bit too much and it's quite cheap and tacky. There's one particular scene where she tells him she's going to get him a dessert and it's milk with egg in it, and she's like, "Oh, try it, it's really sweet, you'll like it." And then he says, oh, I don't like it very much, and tries to give it back to her. And then she sort of spills it. It's almost really deliberate. She spills it down his trouser leg. And then she spends a good few minutes intensely staring at him while she wipes his trouser leg very slowly. And it's just so, like, tacky and awful to watch. And just, yeah, it's laughable. It's very, very laughable.
Yeah, I can't say I would be a fan of milk with egg, I have to be honest. That doesn't sound very appetizing to me.
That's obviously her. That's from her playbook. You see, she like lures men with the old milk with egg trick. You know?
Exactly. I'll have to try that one sometime. See if it works. There's another couple of scenes that I've got to be honest. I really like this film a lot. I think it has a lot going for it, and I think it's a lot smarter than most of the films that we're going to be talking about on this list. It doesn't sound as if
it made me fall asleep.
Oh dear. Now you see, this is closer. This is going to sound harsh, and I'm really sorry, but this is closer to like a proper film as opposed to a lot of horror films that we watch. Because
Greg,
sorry, I had to go there. I'm afraid. I had to go there. I'm afraid. Now, that notwithstanding, there were a couple of other scenes that I did find quite amusing. So first of all, there's a scene where, because he's got all these dead bodies in his house, they start to really, really, really smell and attract stray dogs to his house. So what he has to do is he buys lots of air freshener.
Yeah, or they describe it as perfume, don't they, when he goes to the shop?
Yeah, or he may have bought some like aftershave or perfume, and he goes to buy this from a shop, and the shopkeeper, the way he's dubbed, is absolutely hilarious. It's like, oh yes, oh sir, you must try this one. All the ladies will love you. It's like, oh, it's just, oh my god.
Yeah, that scene is absolutely ridiculous, and the whole thing is dubbed in this kind of nice weather we're having accent, very posh British accent, which is very amusing. And and another part that stood out in this film actually is at one point they do break the fourth wall. Did you notice that?
Now, I didn't notice that, so which part are you referring to?
Well, there's a part, and I've noted down the quote. And somebody says, don't be silly, darling. You can only kill a person as easily as that in the movies.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. So, yes, that would be fourth wall breaking there.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. But aside from that, and the perfume scene, which was very hilarious, I did find this movie quite slow going.
Oh dear. As I said, I really enjoyed this, and I found this very interesting. Now, one of the reasons I found it interesting is the relationship between Marcos and our dog walker character, who's called Nestor, who is not... It's implied that he's gay, but he's not massively effeminate, and it's not really pushed in your face that he's gay, although there is a scene where they seem to be kind of flirting in a swimming pool, which I thought was quite funny again. First of all, that there's a club out there where you can go swimming late at night, and also because they just seem to be, just sort of flirting with each other in the swimming pool, which I did find quite homoerotic and slightly hilarious. There's also a great bit of dialogue sort of earlier on in the film where Nestor is walking his dog, and he has the great line, he's horny, do you know anyone who's got a bitch?
Oh yeah, I remember that line. Yeah, that did make me laugh as well. There's a lot of space in between these bits that amused me, so it does feel quite sort of drawn out.
But I found their relationship quite interesting, and it's interesting in terms of that Marcos is this very working class man who works in a slaughterhouse, whereas Nestor, he is more upper class. So, for example, this must have been set during when Franco was in charge in Spain, because there's a scene where the police just randomly turn up. Nestor and Marcos are out just going for drinks somewhere. As you do, and the police just randomly turn up and ask them for her ID. Now, obviously, Marcos absolutely shits himself because he thinks, oh my god, I've killed all these people. Whereas Nestor's like, yeah, I don't have my ID with me, sorry. And they're like, why don't you have your ID with you? And then it's point out that he lives in a very affluent part of town in this very sort of huge new apartment block. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's fine. Just remember next time not to have it with you. So it's quite interesting that, again, class is used in quite an effective way in this film because, you've got the working class and you've got the upper class who, can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, that is true. What did you make of, Rosa, so she's the last one to die. And that death I found, very disturbing because he bangs her head against a wall to kill her. So there's no weapon, he's just doing it with brute force, and it's very harsh. I found that incredibly harsh to watch.
Yeah, and he does it quite resignedly as well. It's just like, I really don't want to do this, but I kind of have to. So, and he just, because he doesn't use a weapon, as you say, he kind of is just pushing her really hard against a wall and sort of banging her head.
Yeah, repetitively, yeah.
Yeah, it was very sad because, let's say he didn't really want to do it, but he felt he had to because, again, doesn't want to get caught by the police. And that's one of the reasons, and this is a spoiler alert, that's one of the reasons why I think Nestor, he survives the whole film, because at no point does Nestor say, you should go to the police, because one, he would have died, and two, the reason he doesn't, and this is where the apartment on the 13th floor comes into play, because he has actually been spying on Marcos the whole time with binoculars, so he can actually see into Marcos's house, and he can see him killing all these people.
Ah, okay, I see. It's a bit more clever than I sort of initially picked up on.
See, there you go, yeah.
Or maybe he doesn't kill him because he's got the hots for him, really.
Or that too, that too. Can't judge these things. So eventually, the ending of the film is Marcos, finally turning himself into the police. Which, if you think about it, if he'd done that in the first instance, he might not have gotten in so much trouble, and all those people wouldn't have had to die. But as I said, the film wouldn't have lasted very long. It would have only lasted about 10 minutes.
He did get himself into a bit of a tiz, Marcos, didn't he? It wasn't really. He shouldn't have needed to do that.
Ah, that Marcos, getting himself into a tiz.
Yeah, got himself into a spot of bother.
Exactly. So I'm going to say not a video nasty. I'm not sure why it was a video nasty, to be honest, other than the title, The Cannibal Man. They obviously didn't watch the film before putting it on the list. They must have just assumed it was, another jungle cannibal film, when it's obviously not. If you had watched it for any sort of, even 5 seconds, you'd have known it's not a jungle cannibal film. Possibly for the slaughterhouse footage, but there are other films out there that also have slaughterhouse footage, and they were not banned. So
yeah, I'm going to say that you're probably right. I bet they didn't watch it all. They assumed by the title it was worse than it was, because you would think that. Despite the cleaver violence, the banging the head against the wall, and the slaughtered cows, I'm going to say no, because it's not that much. It's not that violent. If I can almost fall asleep watching it, then it can't be that violent.
Or possibly you were very tired.
No, I was just a bit bored.
Okay. Well, I really like the film, everyone, so it's fine. So this is what happens when the shoe is indeed on the other foot. This is how it feels. I will not be so harsh on Rob Zombie in the future.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, this film is not available on DVD in the UK because it has never been released. I'm sure if it was released, it would be released uncut, but no one has actually gone out there to try and do so. So, I'm going to say you will have to use other means to try and locate this film if you want to watch it. So, that is our third and final film for this show. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I've certainly enjoyed doing it, as I'm sure Ria has as well.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the show. Can't wait for the next one.
Indeed, I can't wait for the next one either. Some really interesting films to look forward to on the next one, I'm sure. So, I'm sure you're listening on iTunes already, but if you're not, please rate us. Please give us a positive rating. You can also hit us up on Twitter, @LamentHorror. That's @LamentHorror. If you have, let us know what you think of the show. If you want to have a conversation with us, if you think we're great, if you think we're terrible, by all means, just hit us up on there anyway. We're also on Facebook, which is The Lament Configuration Podcast, and on YouTube also under The Lament Configuration Podcast. So yeah, by all means, just let us know what you think.
And I'm Ria Fend, alternative model and budding actress. My public Facebook page is under Ria Fend, that's FEND, and I'm on Instagram Ria_Fend, and Twitter the same. And I'm posting on the Lament Configurations social media as well, letting everybody know about the latest shows, and I'll be posting some updates and some pictures on there soon as well. Just want to say thanks to everybody who's tuned in and subscribed on iTunes, and I hope that we'll have many of you returning soon. Thank you.
Yeah, and we've already had some lovely feedback from those of you who've listened to our previous shows. So we thank you very much, and we hope that it continues. So after this show, I will never look at a man holding a power tool in his hand in the same way ever again.